course, being a sarcastic New Yorker, I responded, now I knew him well, so I could get away with it. So that means if you don't get out of bed, you'll have a really good day. And he'd smile, and you're silly, guys. But we discussed the fact that his days, the end of every day, he's in the red. And he's got more negative experiences than positive experiences. And that, again, we're here really talking about, in many ways, higher functioning children with autism when we talk about that. And the majority are not. So the higher functioning will become our focus, but the majority of kids with autism, it's still the case that probably 2/3 of children with autism have intellectual development that's below the 5th percentile. And if you want my research or the science, I can send you the citations. But the kids that most interest us are the kids where we see that they have lots of islands of competence, that we see they have normal academics or normal intellect. They clearly have normal capacity, and yet they're struggling. And those struggles, does she want to go out? It's okay. Am I boring you? It's all right. Okay, I don't want to put you on the spot, but don't let your parents make you stay here, because I'm not very interested. Okay, all right. But those are the kids that we're primarily been focusing on, because they seem to have all of the attributes necessary to lead normal lives, but have 3 problems. And problem number 1 is they have social communication problems. They don't take perspective, they don't get it, they don't. Problem number 2 is they have atypical interests in behavior. And in one test, they call it restricted, repetitive, in the new DSM. They call it stuff that nobody understands. I just call it unusual behavior. They have unusual interests, unusual pattern of behavior. And then they have a 3rd problem. It's not in the DSM, but all the research supports it, and there's political reasons why it's not in the DSM. They have problems with self-regulation. More than half meet the diagnostic criteria for attention deficit. And if that many meet that criteria, then their symptoms are part of the autism triad, not a comorbid or double condition. And more than half end up on stimulants, and the stimulants, I have no stock in drug companies, but the stimulants seem to help them. Okay, so I got way off on a tangent. Let me backtrack. The tangent I got off on is that I think what we're going to learn about autism is that the treatments that we're so focused on finding the right treatments probably are not going to make significant long-term differences in the lives of these children. Just like in ADHD, just like in other conditions. That the ordinary phenomena, the experiences of children every day, and I'm not arguing for full mainstreaming here, I'm arguing to try and find a way, say the way they do at Spectrum here, to try and find a way to have children lead as normal a daily life as possible, given the limitations that they have. And that phenomena bothers me more with the kids that I see, the mindset, like my little friend, who, what is it going to take to have a good day? I finally asked him, well, what would it take to have a great day? And he said, oh, no school, pizza, and I can stay up late. So we're getting somewhere. But it's that idea that your mindset, how you come to think about yourself, ends up being really a self-fulfilling prophecy. And when you talk to kids who struggle with social learning, and I call this, for me, this is a social learning problem. I really think that's what autism is. It's a strongly language-based social learning problem. And they just don't pick up on the social. And I'll come back to that. Let me go back to where I was when I first started, which was, what does a neuropsychologist do? Which will kind of give you a framework. So if you were seeing me, I saw a family today with a child who has autism. After I explained to them, I'm not as concerned about labels, and I am more concerned about impairment than I am about symptoms, and I'm more concerned about strengths than liabilities. And I'm interested in trying to bootstrap and harness the normal everyday experiences that all children have that help shape who they are and how they see the world. I then explained that neuropsychologists look at ability, knowledge, and skill. And that's how we're going to try and understand your child. Abilities are hardwired. Some people have better balance. Some people have better ability to read emotion. We have a word for that, emotional intelligence. Some people have better sequencing ability. They learn to read faster than other children. It's not a crime to say that we're not all created equal. not that biology is destiny, it just affects probability. And if you have better sequencing, you'll learn to read faster than kids who don't. It doesn't mean that kids who have poor sequencing can't learn to read. And if you have better balance, you'll learn to ride a bicycle before the other kids. It doesn't mean that a kid with poor balance can't learn to ride a bicycle. And if you're pretty good at picking up the social nuances and social cues of others, then people are going to like you, right? So, I'm in a pub in London a few years ago, and a couple comes in with this baby, and the first thing he does as they walk by is she's walking by, and he's looking at me, right? He's looking right at me and gives me a big smile, right? Because he's learned this kind of social engagement. And what is he learning about the world? Well, everybody looks at, smiles at him, right? Then he stuck his tongue out. His parents are like that. He learns, sticks his tongue out and gets a response from me. I go, oh, you look at that, isn't that cute? Another couple came in about the same time, and their baby was having a difficult day, and he was crying and irritable, and they were not having a good time. And I will argue that from a very young age, a child who has this biological push towards social engagement gets a very different kind of feedback from the world around him. And that feedback, in an emergent function way, shapes how that child looks at the world. So this is ability. It's more hardwired. Some people are better at it than others. Again, not to discriminate, not to say it's your destiny, just to appreciate that abilities play a role, and neuropsychologists look at that. In cognitive abilities, I look at planning, something called simultaneous, how well you integrate information. I don't use the word intelligence very much because it used to mean how well you solve problems, and now it means how much you know. And really, how much you know is not a sign of your intelligence. But that's how it's kind of looked at in the schools. And so I use the word simultaneous processing or sequencing, which is another neuropsychological ability, or attention to detail. So I look at certain abilities that influence how people acquire knowledge over time. And this particular ability of social engagement seems to be very important in our species, emerges very early because the baby is completely helpless. Our babies are not salmon and snakes. They're not ready to go in a week. And they're not bear cubs. They're not ready to go in a year. They're not higher primates. They're not ready to go in 2 or 3 years. Well, maybe we are higher primates, but they're not the highest primate. Our children don't grow up till they're 30 nowadays. So there's this long period during which we have to look out for them, right? They're completely helpless. Our species has traded away any ability to survive independently at a young age for what? A big brain. We've invested all of our evolutionary energy in having a big brain that takes a long time to develop. We don't have thick skin, we don't have hair, we walk on 2 legs, which is not very efficient. We cannot survive out in the wild unless we use our thinking power, our brain. And so there's a push, if you're a fan of evolution, there's a push for babies to figure out how to get people to like them. And they do it very quickly. And you just have to be comfortable with the idea of tens of thousands of generations. There's a selection. The baby who looks at you and smiles is going to get taken care of, and that's just the way it is. And so babies very quickly do what? Make eye contact. We have pictures of newborns looking you in the eye. What do children with autism do? Look at your mouth. In one of our projects, we have children with autism making faces, and they make mouths first. It's very interesting. And they don't read faces. We have this one task where they can reveal bits of a face to try and tell you what the child's emotions are. And they have a very hard time. They reveal the whole face and they still don't know the kid is happy. And they just can't, and they don't know where to look. And so they don't seem to have that ability, right? That programming that instinctually pushes them to say, oh, I'm going to look at you, and then I'm going to smile at you. And what do we do in response? Oh, we smile. #1 visited site on the web, baby kittens, baby puppies. We love babies. I did cleft palate clinic for a dozen years in primary children. These children are not attractive, but they're somehow cute. You like to look at them, even though they've got problems. We are attracted to young children. What do? We raise our voices. Babies are born with the muscles of their ear tuned to the range of women's voices. They hear women over men. They hear men over random sounds. In a little bit of research Steve Porges has done, now he's at the University of Maryland, children who seem to be prone towards autism don't have that. They don't have a preference for sounds in the environment. If anything, they orient to low-frequency sounds of predators. You know, this kind of, oh, something bad is coming my way. So their ears are set differently, and they have vagus, differences in the vagus. The vagus is an old and new cranial nerve, controls the heart, the face, the muscles of the ear. In some research with children who have autism that looks at heat in your face, you know, how much heat you're having, they show children with autism, their faces are kind of dead. They don't innervate as much. They don't smile as much. You can't tell by looking at their faces how they feel. So they're kind of programmed a little bit differently. And we talk to them in high voices. Men coming upon a young baby do what when they talk to the baby? They raise their voice up into the range, and they don't even realize why they're doing it. I mean, there's this kind of instinctual connection. But is that enough? Is ability enough to set you out on the world? No, because you could have all the genes to speak. If nobody speaks to you, you'll never talk. And you could have all the genes to socialize, but if no one ever gives you the opportunity to socialize, it's called emerging function in genetics, what happens? You turn into the wild boy of Avignon, right? You become autistic if you don't have a chance to engage that socialization. What if you're a twin? Have you seen those two little twins on the web in diapers and socks carrying on a conversation with each other? No, you don't have no idea what they're saying, but they're laughing and jumping, and they're engaged, and so they create their own language. So you have to have at least somebody, even if you don't know anything about language, and I don't know anything about language, our genetics will push us to create a language. But if I have no one to create a language with, then I'm up the creek. So it's not just ability, it's also knowledge. Neuropsychologists look at knowledge. Knowledge is anything you learn by experience. Could be how to read a book, could be how to play a game, could be how to socialize. Anything you have to learn by doing is knowledge. You apply your abilities to acquire knowledge. If the world was simple, I could measure your abilities, measure your knowledge, and I'm good at it, so I could find something wrong with every one of you, and I would know everything about you. But there's a third variable, skill. And skill is not a noun, skill is a verb, as in skillful behavior. Skillfully socializing, skillfully reading, skillfully riding a bicycle, it doesn't matter what. And skill is harder to predict than the stock market. It is hard to predict skill. So you might have great sequencing abilities, learn to read really well, and I put you in a class and the subject matter doesn't interest you, you're not skillful. You don't do the work. You have impairment. You could have great balance, learn to ride a bicycle really well, because that's knowledge. And reading, by the way, is knowledge. Math is knowledge. You could learn to ride a bicycle well. I put you in a race and I fail to appreciate. You get nervous in performance situations and you hyperventilate and you fall down. Not because you lack knowledge or ability, but because you lack skill. So if you came to see me, and I'm not marketing, Jennifer can tell you I've got a 6-month wait.
Yeah.
I'm not marketing here, but that's what we do when we take a history, is I try and give you a framework to understand what it is I do. And what I do is not, I want to make a diagnosis or not make a diagnosis. What I want to do is, you're the case manager, I'm the consultant. I have to help you see the world through the eyes of the child. To do that, I have to give you a framework, some system by which to understand and appreciate the child. So, what are your child's abilities? And this is the interesting irony in this group of what we call higher functioning children with autism. The interesting irony is they have pretty good abilities, not the social part of it. And we know that the brain sort of has a three-part, as the brain evolved, it's kind of three parts. It's the thinking part, the social part, and the behavioral or doing part. And you could be gifted on the thinking part and just not have a clue on the social part, or you could be just great on the social part. People love you, you're the life of the party. But you know, you can't think your way out of a paper bag, maybe. Right? So that's how I do it. When you look at children with autism spectrum, the higher functioning kids, typically their intellect is okay when they feel like letting you know what they know. So I don't make any pronouncements about their simultaneous processing, their ability to think and problem solve until they're into their teens, and I can make sure that they're really sufficiently motivated to share with me what they know, because they don't have that social contract. They're not as concerned about smiling at me, about making eye contact. They don't really understand, why do I care?